This episode of Taqueando is brought to you by our friends at MVA.wine. You know something I've learned traveling for food? The best meals usually happen when you don't have a plan. You're just walking around, following your instincts. Maybe you see a line of locals at a stand, and suddenly you're eating the best thing you've had all year. Wine works the same way. The other day, Luca, Robert, and I had a chance to taste a few bottles from the folks at MVA.wine, and it had that same feeling. The kind of wines you usually only find because someone puts you onto them. Their process is kind of wild. A few times a year, they get together at a farmhouse in Tuscany and blind taste 50 or 60 wines from tiny producers around the world. Every bottle has to get a unanimous yes. Only 6 make it. Most of these producers barely export, so these are wines you almost never see on shelves here in LA. They keep the whole thing small too, around 600 members. That's about all the wine these producers can spare. If you're curious, they set up something special for listeners of Taqueando and the LA Food Podcast. For listeners of Taqueando and the LA Food Podcast, the first 20 people who sign up with code LA Food get $50 off their first collection. Go to mva.wine/subscribe and use the code LA Food. That's mva.wine/subscribe and use code LA Food. Hey everyone, welcome to Taqueando. I'm your host, Bill Esparza, and this week we are doing a Q&A. It's been a while, and these questions have been collecting in my inbox, so thank you for sending your questions, and we're going to get to a bunch of them. But first, at Taqueando, eating antojitos is a way of life, from the world's most celebrated dining rooms to the gritty stands and storied market stalls that preserve culture. Life is short, so we must eat well. And here are this week's Antojitos rundown. Well, normally right now, I'd be telling you where I ate this week, but I'm going to tell you where I did not eat, and that is Noma. Now, it is true, I did not have a reservation for Noma. Now, full disclosure, René Redzepi was going to be on our podcast, and we had been talking about having him in and trying to schedule that. And of course, he dropped off as soon as all this started happening. So, and you know, I would say at this point, I would only have René Redzepi on at this time um, if he were willing to talk about this situation and answer some tough questions. But he's got a lot of problems right now, so I don't think he's doing podcasts. Anyways, I do want to comment on the protest because one of the Q&A requests was the controversy at Noma. Now, first of all, I want to shout out to my colleagues out there in the food journalists, the journalists out there that have been covering this story. First off, a big round of applause to Julia Moskin, who broke the story, and her story for the New York Times: punching, slamming, screaming, a chef's past abuse haunts Noma, the world's top-rated restaurant, is a must-read. This was the story that you know exposed all of us to this. And now I know rumors. I'm hearing that rumors have been going on for years. I was not aware of any of this. I was not aware of honestly. Seeing René Redzepi on television, what I've seen, he seems very cool and calm. And certainly when we were reaching out to him and talking to him, he was super nice. So I I have to say I did not have that insider information on that on Noma. The other story we want to talk about is a very powerful story by LA Times food critic Jen Harris, who wrote her headline, Noma LA Controversy as a Turning Point: Why This Critic Won't Be Dining There. Another must read on this um, saga. And finally, I think the piece that really encapsulated, you know, something I think René Redzepi needs to think about is the latest story by Tejal Rao, a friend of the podcast, and go back and listen to her episode. And for the New York Times, in the Critics Notebook, she wrote, Noma could have changed so much more than food. And that is really the bottom line, isn't it? It's been such an influential restaurant. It has, I mean, all the chefs that are going to be on our program, on the podcast here, from Latin America, from Mexico, Central America, South America, uh, um, chefs from upcoming episodes we have that were alumni, alums of Noma, and not, we're not talking stagiaires, we're not talking interns, we're talking people that actually were in the kitchen, were on stations, and are now famous in their own right. Jose Luis Inostroza, who, when Rene did his apology, wrote, you're a mentor. Obviously, Jose Luis still has high regard and respect for Rene for what he's done for him. Another one we spoke to is Edgar Nunez, who had also been at Noma. And upcoming in a few weeks, we're going to be talking to Manuela Bufara, Chef Manuela Bufara from Manu in Curitiba, Brazil. And it's interesting because her takeaway from her time at Noma is really, people are saying, oh, Noma's created all these abusers, but Manuela is the opposite of that. She has a sustainable kitchen that values humans. She limits her hours so that her staff doesn't have to, they can go home and have an evening, and they're not there till 1 a.m. doing military scrubs of the kitchen. So like, you know, there's a really nuanced conversation to have. There's a lot of anger right now and rage over it. And let me just say, what is my position on stabbing people, poking, whatever it was, stabbing people in the kitchen, punching people, um, you know, using homophobic language. Um, that's abhorrent. I don't think there's anybody out there saying that it's okay. I think there are chefs, famous chefs that are colleagues, and others that have learned that they really do owe Rene Redzepi and Noma so much. They have their whole concept is this whole idea of looking at the ingredients around you and keeping it close to your a close footprint, um, a limited footprint of ingredients that you use, and also finding things to eat that you haven't thought about, and using ingredients you haven't thought about. So that part of it is so beautiful, and really Renee has been a leader for these chefs in business, like how to run a successful business, all these things. But you know there is no defending what he did, and you know it sounds ridiculous. It sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, sounds some of the stuff is pretty crazy. I think the rumors of what he had been doing, I don't know if they were all that shocking. And I think leading up to the pop up this week, I think a lot of those stories that were getting posted on Instagram were not surprising to me, but I do think that when Julia Moskin's report dropped, that's a whole different ballgame. Like when you have verified reports, not only of berating or things, the things that Julia Moskin reported were non-negotiable assaults. Like that is the definition of what they were.
No, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that Jen Harris kind of said, "Hey, like call this what it is. This is not abuse. This is assault. There is a difference." So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that that report was a huge deal because it's different between a bunch of people sharing, private DMs not attributed to people and a New York Times reporter verifying with time codes and emails 35 different accounts over 20 years. That's a different ballgame.
Yes. And so for us here that are, aware of what goes on in journalism, what goes on. I've written for the New York Times. You know, the fact checking I have to go through just to talk about a little fruit cart, is pretty intense. So, yeah, if the New York Times is printing it, they've verified the information. And I think one woman even shared an email she had sent to her parents during that time. So, you know, and obviously, Rene Redzepi didn't go and say, this is false and there's no evidence of it. And he didn't. He did what a lot of people do, like, oh, the fog of my in the fog of my violence, I don't really remember what I did, you know. And so, yeah, there is no one that's defending it, and I feel like talking about this. I'm not defending anything, and I'm not going to this dinner. If I were to receive an invite, which I'm not, I wouldn't go. And honestly, I again, this coverage has been, even LA Magazine
Mhm.
covered this. I was like, LA Magazine was on it, which is not normally their thing to get political. And Eater LA has been doing incredible coverage. So I want to shout out to my, I'm not a staffed writer at Eater, but I'm a freelance writer. But Rebecca Rowland has been doing incredible coverage as well, and really kind of also being the consistent coverage of all that's going on. So Eater, New York Times, LA Magazine, um, LA Times, of course. What's crazy is that there's a couple publications in town that did not cover this, and that's, well, okay. One, I'm going to say LA Weekly. That's not a surprise.
It's not.
I don't even know LA Week. We don't even know what LA Weekly does anymore. But certainly, I did Google, and like they don't have any coverage of it. And LA Taco.
Mm.
LA Taco is 10 toes on the ground. That's their motto. And I'm very surprised that they don't have a story covering this. And given that they've covered Damian, they covered the food poisoning incident at LA Times.
They covered a tree being removed from Highland Park's York Boulevard.
They cut right. They covered right. Wasn't that? Didn't they also cover Mr. Tempo's
Yes.
desecration of a landmark? But nowhere to be found on this Noma thing. That's
Yeah. I was at the protests covering with Luca for the LA Food Pod. We were gonna post some stuff on Instagram, but it all blew up too quick. It was like the Avengers of food media. Like anybody who's anybody was there. I like opened my car door and almost hit Gustavo Arellano on my way out. Matt King pulled up with a little selfie stick. I don't know what he was doing. So obviously the protests and the actual things that were happening were very serious, but it was kind of a cool vibe with all the food reporters and like everyone knew each other. But yeah, LA
yeah.
Taco noticeably absent, let's just say. And maybe we'll leave it at that.
Well, they didn't do a story. They did show up to
They
the
did
protest, I
so they
believe, right?
they showed up to the protests. They had a reporter covering. But yeah, it was an interesting vibe. I will say being there at the protest itself, um, everyone and anyone can give their opinion on Renee and Noma. I'm not going to beleaguer our audience with my opinion on that. What I will give my opinion on is the protest itself. I didn't come in having any like bias for Jason Ignacio White, who's the former chef who's leading this protest. I have no affiliation with One Fair Wage, even though I had heard good things. So I just kind of came in not knowing what to expect with them. I was a little disappointed at the turnout. I'm gonna be honest.
So this is my thing too, and I was asking you about this. That here you have, I would say, the biggest food story in recent times. And certainly as far as a scandal, what is the most famous chef and has been the top restaurant in the world, um, and was able to sell out this
Yeah,
$1,500 a head meal in seconds, minutes, or whatever. And so, given all the press that led up and announcements of the protest and all that build up, to see what you saw there, and here's from the videos, it was like one person made these kind of not great signs, and it didn't have that feeling. When you see a protest, you see some people. Yeah, there's people like look, I'm one of those people. When I showed up for No Kings, I bought a little flag, but I was one of a few people with flags, and there was a lot of people with incredible signs. Right, I'm not a big sign guy, but it didn't seem like it was just like somebody printed something out for everybody, and they had red around it. I don't even know what that was about, and maybe maybe but and there was only 15,
yeah.
20 people there.
I'm by no means an expert in community organizing and protests, but I will say this didn't really feel grassroots. Um, I understand that the nature of the beast of Noma is this is a global restaurant that people were traveling across the world to work at. I also know the nature of the protest was it was at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday. industry professionals are
Yeah.
working or they're asleep because they're about to wake up to go work. So I understand
Yeah.
that that was the case, but also like, yeah, I don't know. I guess that was the only red flag for me on the protest side was okay, like this doesn't really seem like a grassroots movement. I don't know how, and maybe that wasn't their goal. I mean, clearly they got their goal. Renee
Yeah.
has stepped down, or Renee has said he's stepping down in some capacity. Even that we don't know the details of. So I think yeah, it was just a very interesting moment in LA food culture. I think for our purposes here on this podcast, you know, we talk all the time about protecting the people who don't have protections. I think the most what the one of the most disturbing things in the original Julia Moskin article to me was Renee's flippancy with how quick he was to throw out the threat of deportation as if that's not a big deal. Like that to me is something that we as LA as a city, we cannot stand for that. It doesn't matter where you lean politically, like whatever. Obviously, we make our politics very clear here on Takeando, but wherever you stand politically, that is not acceptable. That's not the city that we're going to have. That's not the culture that we're going to have in our food and beverage industry. So I would have liked to see this protest become more about that than about necessarily Noma and Renee. I think Renee and Noma are going to be fine regardless. Like Cadillac is still sending their cars, the dinner is still going on.
Yeah.
Renee, even if these pop up dinners don't happen and Renee is no longer the head of Noma, he is still financially stable for a generation. He does not have to work another day in his life. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be chefs in our own backyard that use and abuse labor of undocumented immigrants, undocumented migrants.
So right, and so this is this is something I've been bringing up now. Again, I this it's the behavior is not acceptable. I want to
Yeah.
repeat that it's not acceptable behavior. Um, Whatever consequences come for Renee, that's he's gonna have to deal with that. Um, Now, what is bothering me about the protest is some of the things. Now, again, not like you said, not everybody is built for that. That has their shit together when it comes to messaging and being out there and talking about, how, what do we need to do? Who do we need to bring into this protest? And so, and I'm not against the protest. I'm not against what happened. I do wonder what about David Chang? you know, David Chang. I mean, what I'm saying is, so many of these people are still like. I mean, David Chang is only since he admitted to his things in his book, and he there was some coverage on him. He's
Oh,
more
yeah.
elevated than ever. I mean, he does like celebrity TV shows, and we are celebrating Marco Pierre White's new social media platform, and that's like the most abusive guy that's ever been in a kitchen. He made Gordon Ramsay cry. Gordon Ramsay, we celebrate Gordon as some big, mascot puppy like our friend, and he's horrible. I actually know a chef. I know a chef in Mexico that he left the profession because of the abuse. And he worked for Gordon Ramsay. He worked for Marco Pierre White. He worked for, um, I forget who he worked for in Europe, um, and Italy, somewhere in Italy. But he basically said that these guys broke him. You know, I mean, the guy was out there with the sign "Noma broke me," but this guy now he didn't go protest. He just left. He left. He's like, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. So he was in Mich. He was a pastry chef in Michelin star restaurants, and he moved to Mexico and he opened a business there. He's super happy. He's doing great work, but that pressure and the culture of that kitchen, it's not for everybody. And I know people are talking about the violence. I'm going to use the word. I'm Gen X, man, so I'm going to use the word hazing, because obviously not all kitchens were, not everyone was stabbing people and getting in a circle in the ice, and oh my, that just sounds like somebody needs somebody's got major problems, doing that. But I would say that the typical, what I've heard over the years, what chefs have told me, is there's a certain kind of badgering, humiliation. There is, there I'm sure there is inappropriate uh, language used for. I mean, I'm positive there's racism and things like that. Um, and so that part of it, I'm never saying is okay. But I do think there's a lot of chefs that sort of, again, they've come in that tradition and they were okay with it. I even talked to one chef that said he thrived under that environment. Like that was, that's that football mentality, suck it up. But I don't think that's, I'm not saying that that's what the way kitchen should be. But my problem, my real problem with this, besides the fact that we're not talking about these other people, is that I looked at Jason Ignacio White's Instagram and I went through it. I'm like, oh, who is this guy? I wanted to see what he was about. And just the fact that I looked from June 6th on of his Instagram, not one post about the undocumented people that are being killed, violently beaten by ICE, dragged, women and children being taken, a blind man being left out in the cold to die. So I'm those people are in these
Hmm.
kitchens. Jason Ignacio White worked alongside um, undocumented people. If he worked here in the United States, I don't know if he worked here, but um, I was talking to someone from the indigenous community the other day, and I said, you go to these restaurants, like what percentage of? Well, I'll just mention it's Odilia from who's also a friend of the podcast from Cielo, and she said like some of the restaurants in town have 50%, not just Latinos, like people usually, oh, those are all Mexicans and Salvadorans, but no, these are indigenous people. So undocumented, indigenous, workers that don't, they can't stage at Noma. Since when can an undocumented person working as a dishwasher in a kitchen in Los Angeles go stage? All these stories. There's a certain amount of. I know it was tough. I know people sold their. I read that someone sold their car, but come on, you're in your 20s and you're going for it. You want to take a, like I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go to Noma and I'm going to work there and I'm going to make it. You sell your car. That's still a place of privilege that you were able to go do that. So the people that actually are running our kitchens are undocumented people, are from Mexico, Central America, and they don't get to go stage. They don't get these opportunities. They just work their asses off so that they're the ones that are building everyone. So where these guys are saying that, Noma's millions were built off of their backs. Well, the whole
Hmm.
industry is built off the backs of indigenous Mexicanos, Salvadoreños, Guatemaltecos, Hondureños that are in the kitchens and they're not part of the
Yeah,
conversation.
absolutely.
That is a big problem for me. And again, I'm going to say that maybe Jason Ignacio White and their group, they haven't figured this out yet. I don't think he seems to be savvy. He's emotional and he's out there and he definitely went through it and he's sharing his experience and it's bringing a lot of attention to him. But I'm concerned that um, we're again, once again, we're not talking about the most vulnerable people at a time when ICE raids are going on in the United States. That I'm worried there's these, two chefs the LA chef um, and this Jason Ignacio White guy standing out there demanding. It seems to be if there's going to be a real movement, there needs to be a conversation that includes that group. So he doesn't have a restaurant. I mean, I would understand if he owned a restaurant. I get why chefs have to be careful because they're a public business and they don't want to bring controversy into their restaurant. And I saw I was at a conference recently where a chef said, I just lost my restaurant last year, so fuck it, I can say whatever I want now, and that was literally their position. So I think Jason Ignacio White is in a position that he could say what he wants to say, and he hasn't even mentioned undocumented people, and that's just a big flaw that bothers me that they're not included because they are being abused today. They're having wages stolen. They are being threatened to be
Yeah.
deported. Like if your whole point is that, I don't know why you're not talking about our people too.
And it's also not to say that there's some like woke list of checkpoints that you have to check every box in order to say anything about advocacy. Like it's not about that. It's not about oppression Olympics and this person's more oppressed than this, and that means that one's oppression is not worthy. It's about intersectionality. The same forces at work that allow René Redzepi to get away with abuse and to get away with the exploitation of free labor are the same forces that make it so that the Los Angeles food and beverage industry is built on the backs of undocumented labor without protections. These are the same
Yeah.
ethics. These are the same problems. So again, it's not to say that one's more important than the other, but I do get where you're coming from and saying, yeah, like there's momentum in this area. Like this is where LA dining is going. We need to protect these people because we see how important it is, and we see that the federal government is going to come and attack them. That is non-negotiable. That is not a political biased opinion. That is what is happening. So for a movement like this with Jason and with One Fair Wage, again, this is not to say that they're anti like this is not to
No.
say that they're anti-immigration or they're anti-undocumented labor, but like, yeah, the intersectionality of the movement is what's going to propel it forward. And I think that the the turnout of that event being low and their lack of intersectionality with the undocumented migrant movement is not a coincidence. I think those things are hand in hand. So we'll see. It's a very early movement. I don't want to throw hate on them. Obviously, we're pro protest over here. We're pro
No, I
progressive.
mean
So
it.
yeah,
I I don't think it's about throwing hate on. I think
yeah.
that
It's a critique.
it's going to go on it's going to go on no matter what.
Yeah.
But if I look at what's going on in the United States right now, I mean, I live here in Los Angeles, and the bigger problem is not what Jason Ignacio White's going through. The bigger problem is what's happening
Right.
daily on the streets of Los Angeles. So I don't think you have to be woke to not, you know, it's you have to be oblivious to not know that,
Yeah.
you know.
Agreed.
And so if I think about severity of the abuse of people in the kitchen, that's where it's happening, and the worst abuse has to be, an ICE raid coming into the restaurant and dragging people out without due process and disappearing them to prison so that lawyers can't find them, and trying to, drop them off at the border and try to grab their children to lure them. This is much worse
Yeah.
than what went on at Noma, and so and it doesn't it doesn't take any thing away from what people went through at Noma, and that also happened in Copenhagen. That did not happen here. It's not like, it's not like there's an LA kitchen here in town punching people, you know, and but that's my, I would say, as a person observing it, and you know and for people who are saying, well, I just called out a couple of publications for not covering it. They're asking, well, where's your coverage? Well, Eater, I write for Eater, and Eater has a person that does that. I also wrote almost 4 years ago about um, the MAD conference not paying Mariscos Jalisco fairly. They did not offer them. So I wrote a story about that, and I covered. So I was ahead of the curve, people. I was already noticing that when they came to town. Um, Raul of Mariscos Jalisco had reached out to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I go, "That's a pretty low offer," and he was like, "Yeah, I can't. Like, I would like to do this. This is like he said that's a great person and a person that's like respected, but this is why are they paying so low?" So I pointed that out almost 4 years ago, 2022, and so uh, and like I said, my publication's covering it, and we're talking about it here. And yes, it's absolutely horrible. And it's also, I think, I think I identify most with what Tejal had to say about it, and it's because what Manuela Bufada said is it's a lack of imagination
Hmm.
to lead that way, and it's poor leadership, it's inability to lead, and I do feel a little bit like I can relate going into music as a young person. I was on the road at 21, you know, and all these chefs that came in the early, that are from this tradition of abuse, the cycle of abuse, they all had their kitchens by I think Rene Redzepi opened his restaurant when he was 25,
Very young.
too young. And the kitchen doesn't teach, culinary school doesn't teach how to be a leader. Obviously not.
Hmm.
These kitchens have shown you to be an abuser and to take it or not take it. And I'm sure there's so many great chefs that left this profession because they just don't want to deal with the bullshit. I know a lot of chefs are private chefs because they don't want to deal with the harassment in the kitchen. It's obviously it's a horrible business model, and all these I see all these chefs complaining about labor and like they can't get people to work. I'm just thinking, well, you're an asshole, you
Yeah.
know. And you know, and I look at Manuela Bufada, and I don't want to give away her episode because we're going to give her a chance to talk. But like, you know, it's a it's a lack of leadership. But again, Rene Redzepi, I think, did so much to innovate cuisine. He's one of in our lifetime. There's been two. There was Rene Redzepi, and before him, Ferran Adria are the two great innovators of the culinary world. And so, yes, why didn't Noma become, an incubator for humanity about how to be great teachers, how to be great mentors that did not try to hurt their employees. And it just sounds like this guy was just a machine walking around all day, just being horrible to people, And it's it's almost comically awful.
Yeah, agreed. I think Tagel's piece puts it better than I could ever put it myself. So I agree. Go read that article. I think that's kind of the
Yes.
that's the seminal, that's the pivotal discourse on this topic. I think.
Yes, and I say, go get him, go get him, go get David Chang. You know, get them all. But don't forget the undocumented people and the people that actually make all these kitchens run. You know, and include them, mention them at the very least, and even better, invite them to be, you know, to be in this conversation.
Agreed.
This episode of Taqueando is brought to you by El Encanto in Santa Barbara, Santa Barbara's most storied luxury hideaway. Up in the hills of the American Riviera, El Encanto has been welcoming guests since 1918. It is a 90-room property with individually styled bungalows and suites spread across 7 acres of terraced gardens, with panoramic views of downtown Santa Barbara and the Pacific. It feels tucked away and serene, but you are just minutes from everything. And I'll say this personally, when I'm in Santa Barbara, this is my favorite place to stay. There's just nothing else like it. There is a zero-edge pool overlooking downtown Santa Barbara and the Pacific Ocean, a boutique spa, bikes to cruise around town, and access to fitness and wellness programming. And the food is serious. The dining room and terrace is helmed by multiple James Beard Award nominee, Chef Joel Veland, whose resume includes Noma and Gramercy Tavern. It is seasonal Central Coast cuisine, thoughtful wines, and one of the best views in California. They also host an intimate culinary series that brings in celebrated chefs for special evenings of food, wine, and storytelling. Whether you are planning a romantic weekend, a wedding, or just need to reset with some ocean air and great meals, El Encanto is the move. Visit elencanto.com and book your stay and tell them Taqueando sent you. Thanks to everyone for the questions, for the Q&A. We want to do more of these. We know that part of this, building this podcast is being inclusive, having people being part of the conversation. And we have great, commenters, listeners that have been following us and loyal from the beginning. So we appreciate that. And so we're going to answer your questions and we're going to shout you out here.
Okay, this first question comes from, if I have the liberty to say, probably Takeando's number one fan. It's Mort for Sandris on Instagram. She is always so supportive of us. So this first question comes from her. The question is salt, tostada, and no lime. What is the next rule that you will cover, Bill?
Yes. Yes. More for Sandris is amazing. She comments. We love her here at Acquired Taste Media. And I would say that one thing that's been on my mind is that tortillas is that Mexican Americans here, and I'm from that community, Latinos here in the United States do not know what to do with the damn tortillas. Now that depends on what community you come from. Oaxacans, they definitely know what to do, but I feel like it was lost in translation. The how we eat with tortillas. I see it on TikTok all the time. People not knowing how to eat with tortillas. So I think that's one of the episodes we're going to get to at some point. And I want to answer one more for Sandris, is she asked me where are good spots to listen to jazz in LA. Baked Potato, Catalina Bar and Grill, Spaghettini, Blue Note, and just if you know jazz, um, you'll be able to pick out the good nights to go. But I would say if you don't know it all and you just want to give it a shot and go to a place that's going to have good music, I'm going to say first and foremost, right now the Blue Note is having great artists, and Catalina Bar and Grill, whatever you can't go wrong with any of these places.
Yeah,
All
the Blue
right,
Note is great. I think we need more jazz bars in LA in 2026. That is
yeah,
just I'll get behind that blindly.
yeah, supper clubs, and I did write about Catalina for Eater LA. This is my little supper club series, so check that out.
Okay, the next question comes from NWK One Way. The question is, what is a salsa breakdown for what you prefer, I guess, on pork, beef, shrimp, fish, green, red, and so forth? What's the baseline for salsas?
So now here's what now in LA it gets a little funny because your typical street vendor tends to just have red and green without any, you know, uh, like okay, we just have to have a red and a green. Sometimes you're dealing with a street food vendor that doesn't really have a concept. They don't have salsas that match their food. They just like we're going to put a red, or we're going to do this salsa because we like it, but it doesn't go with the food. But if you go to Mexico, anywhere in Mexico, the salsas are correct. So when you go to a stand, the salsas are designed to go with the food that they're serving. So they might have a red and a green, but they're going to be different based on that cuisine. So for me, it's not about the protein, it's about what's in it, right? It's is it a stew? Does it have a sauce on it already? So I think you have to think about that. Now, if you're talking about fish tacos, those are there's a red and green, but the main thing with the fish tacos, you got to have the cream or mayonnaise, either cream or mayonnaise, and then after that, they usually have some kind of almost like aiolis, like a chipotle one, and then they'll have a jalapeno or cilantro one, like a green sauce. So you want to get all those creamy sauces in there, and salsa. You can use both, and remember they have different functions. The green brings the acid, and it might have other ingredients that you want in the taco, and the red is going to usually bring your heat. So for me on a fish taco, I'm if I'm in ensenada, I'm doing red and green, or if the stand has other salsas, I'm going to be looking into those too. If it's seafood, like you seafood tacos from Tijuana, you want salsa macha. That's kind of the typical salsa. And then when you're talking about shrimp, again, what kind of shrimp? Ensenada style, that's red and green at the stand. If you're talking about camarón enchilado from Tijuana, you're talking about again salsa macha. Beef. For carne asada, the essential salsa is salsa tatemada, a roasted tomato and chile salsa. So that, if you're in Sonora, that's essential. If you're in Tijuana, it's a tomato sauce, a pure tomato sauce with no chilies, and it's usually boiled. It's not really that's not a tatemada, but it's a tomato sauce. So you want to have some kind of tomato molcajete sauce, tatemada, uh, tomate sauce, and and then you want your heat. If you're again Tijuana, Mazatlan, they don't really have heat, so you're going to eat like a chile torreado to get your heat. And then pork. Again, is it carnitas? Carnitas, you want pickling juice. And if you're in Michoacan, you want some kind of pico de gallo with salsa chile manzano. And it just varies. So I would say go to Mexico to what's NWK one way. Go to Mexico and really try the regional styles of tacos, and you're going to start to get the hang for the salsas, and look for the regional taco stands here in Los Angeles that also usually are serving the right salsas for their stands. But if you go to a generic Mexican American stand, you're not going to learn anything. And then, guisados, what kind of sauce is it? Is it a mole? If it's a mole, I don't necessarily want to put a hot sauce on it. If it's a sauce that has, a lot of acid, maybe I want to put a little heat because I just want heat, you know. So there is no color, just think about the protein. Does it have a sauce? What are the other ingredients inside? And really experiment. But again, I think your best bet is to go to Mexico and check it out and have the salsas there.
Okay. Next question is from El Sabio or El Sabizero. Did King Taco really invent the first taco truck in LA?
Yes. Now, do we, we know for a fact that Mexicans in Los Angeles were the first to use catering trucks to sell food. Um, but King Taco, we were pretty sure that there's nobody before them. And King Taco is an innovator in Los Angeles in so many ways. They're really the first taqueria that was a dedicated taqueria that had a style that's really Mexican American, And they started with the truck, or there was like a van or something, and then they inspired the food trucks of the 80s. I don't know if you guys remember the food trucks from the 80s, but they were generic catering trucks, and they would say like E&G catering, and they would go to construction sites, they go to schools, they go to colleges, and they would sell Mexican and American food. So they have breakfast. I think that's where a lot of the breakfast burritos started to become popular here in California. So they'd have breakfast burritos, they'd have breakfast, they'd have club sandwiches, they'd have tortas, they'd have other like sort of generic food that would be popular with a general crowd.
Next question. This is a good one. This is from Woody's Hockey or Woody Shockey. Depends how you read it. How can I tell a restaurant is chasing Michelin stars?
Well, I would here's what I would do is I would okay, if you look at the menu for a 3 Michelin star, 2 Michelin star restaurant, you're going to start to see some uniformity. And so just I think rather than me telling you exactly what that is I would just go down and like there's just certain dishes that start to show up over and over again, and there are also sometimes dishes that are popular at the time, and so that's part of it. But every the people who are chasing the stars have built a restaurant that has a separate area for snacks. You come in, you sit down in a room. So I'm gonna take Toujours, which I'm gonna say is not chasing Michelin stars. They're chasing excellence. Toujours in São Paulo has a patio with this beautiful jaboticaba tree, and there you get cocktails and you get the snacks for the menu, right? And then you go upstairs and you do the tasting menu, separate area. And then you go to the third floor, which is this nice little terrace where they do petit four, coffee, digestifs, cheese courses, and then they give you those little chocolates to go at the end, like a lot of restaurants do. So here's what I would say is that if you see that present, that doesn't necessarily mean they're chasing Michelin stars. But if you see that present, but it's lacking, a warmth about the concept, there's something artificial about the restaurant. It doesn't feel like it's coming from a place or representing something. That is a restaurant chasing Michelin stars.
Great. That's a good answer. This next question comes from the Wino Salcero. Have you ever felt unwelcomed at times in Mexico for being a Chicano?
No, and I would say that I'm pretty welcome everywhere where I go because I'm a good customer. And so what are you laughing at, Rob?
No, it's a good answer. It's a good answer.
Okay, I never know with you, Gen Z. Are you Gen Z?
Yeah, I'm Gen Z.
Yeah, I never know with you guys. Apparently, if you guys say okay, that's like a major diss.
That I haven't heard of. That I'm not
Oh,
aware. I've been
oh,
skipping the meetings. I don't know about that one.
okay, okay, all right. Um, but yeah, I'm a good customer. I speak Spanish, I speak Portuguese. So when I go to Brazil, I'm, I'm conversationally fluent there, and of course, obviously people know that I'm not Brazilian when they hear me speak, but I'm traveling. I'm asking. I'm very curious about the restaurants. I'm very I treat staff very nice. I don't ask questions in an annoying way, but I do show a general interest in what people are doing. And I only know that because of the feedback that I get from people. I've noticed over the years, people are really like, wow, no one's ever asked me that. No one's, and they want to sit down and they don't know I'm a food writer. They might see that I have a camera. I mean, everybody has a camera and, are, using their phone to take photos. Everybody has that. But I think my experience is that people want to talk to me because I'm being a good customer, that I'm really curious, and that's whether I'm in a fine dining place, um, or a street stand. I've had incredible experiences on street stands, so I don't get that when I go out, and I'm not. Obviously, there's places where I would be known and that sort of thing, but my experience is that my willingness to walk into a neighborhood that no one else is coming in and being like a tourist in that neighborhood in a good way. And I also, I exercise this on the street, and I always tell people that are with me, like, I like to, people know I love to take them to Tepito in Mexico City. And when I go there, I tell them, today, everyone that walks towards you has the right of way. Everyone. You move out of the way.
That's a good one.
There, don't assert yourself, because in America we get this, right
Yeah.
now. I mean, you see on videos every day, somebody's like, they want to have power over the situation. The Karens of the world, but that extends beyond Karens. There's this idea of privilege, and I'm like, you do not own any part of this street. It's a public street, but it belongs to them. And that's my attitude. I come in with that attitude. This is their place, and it's you know I treat I'm always moving out of the way. I'm always standing off to the side. I'm always waiting my turn. Somebody cuts in front of me, I don't, it's like, you cut. No, that's their country. I mean, they're the citizens, they're the people that actually live there, they're there every day. So I can wait. It's these little things that we get all upset about, so I let all that shit go. And I'd say I do that most places I go. I don't, you know um if it's the popo, then I might start, causing some problems. But for a restaurant, I'm super nice. I'm super open, and I'm super passive when I go into neighborhoods, because I just want them to feel like I'm here because you let me be here. That's my attitude. You know.
So this one is from friend of the pod, Matt King, Matatui, who just launched a new newsletter that you should all be subscribing to.
Oh, aren't you missing an important part of that?
What?
I wrote for that newsletter this week.
Ah, okay. That I didn't know.
Thanks a lot, Rob.
My bad, that
Jeez.
wasn't in the show notes.
Jeez.
Well, anyway, Matt King asks, what do you think about the El Moro labor situation? I'm assuming he's talking about the churru. The, I'm assu-
The papi chulo.
yeah, I'm assuming he's talking about the new churro spot that has just opened in Echo Park.
Yes, the famous churros from Mexico City. Um, yeah, so I don't, I actually messaged Matt. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know. And I guess there was something on TikTok. I guess somebody complained on TikTok about the work environment there. But other than that, I watched it for a second. But so I'm not aware, Matt. I don't know what's going on there. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I would say that if there's, something going on, we'll find out about it at some point, and people won't want to work there. But I don't know anything about it.
Okay, let's do a quick fire of some other ones.
Yeah.
Really quickly from Jamie G. Any sopes Rex in LA?
Yes. Jamie G. Sopes. Get the damn sope de ostion at Mariscos Los Corchos. That is the coolest sope in town. That is the most bomb sope. It's beautiful. It's a little bit precious. We got some dots on there. We love that. Chorreadas at Tacos La Carreta. Technically, he's not using the tortilla they use down there in Mazatlan. He's like doing a double tortilla, but the chorreada is a type of sope. Um, and it's a taco, but it does use a sope style tortilla in Mazatlan. So try La Carreta and the other people from Mazatlan, um, around town that are doing that. Um, Sopes de picadillo at Antojitos Los Cuates, beautiful. Okay, everything on the menu at Antojitos Los Cuates, which is one of the most incredible traditional restaurants, traditional regional Mexican restaurants in Los Angeles. Go there. So there you go.
Okay, from Odilia Yego. Is a tlayuda a taco?
No, and this is, see, Odilia's got some. I know Odilia. She's out there trying to, like, troll somebody with this. So I'm going to give you that, Odilia. And no, it's not a taco. Um, and it's not a quesadilla. It's not a Mexican pizza. It's none of those things.
Yeah.
It is a distinct dish using, it gets its name from the tortilla, and it doesn't behave like a taco. It's not something we're eating. The main ingredient is actually outside of the tlayuda. So the main ingredient has to be in there for it to be a taco. And it's not like a quesadilla where you're eating either just pure cheese, or you're having something like a guisado inside of a folded tortilla. So it's not that either, and it's the wrong kind of tortilla. So it's its own distinct dish. It's an indigenous dish. So no, it's not a taco. So oh my God, I think Odilia was trying to tell me that tlayuda was on a taco list and it doesn't belong there. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, if you're going to Ponchos Tlayudas and you're a white influencer and you call it a Mexican pizza, you're getting blocked instantly. No questions asked. Next question. This one is from friend of the podcast, Naomi Mendoza of Cuernavaca's Grill. Bill, what is your favorite breakfast burrito and number one taco?
We hate Naomi. We hate Naomi. It's true. The biggest troll. You know what? It's bad enough that I have to read it on the podcast, but she's DMing me all day these kinds of things, just taunting me. No, Naomi. Yes, I know Naomi likes to have fun with old people, so I will oblige her. My favorite breakfast burrito remains the San Diego style breakfast burrito, which is El Carrito. They have one that's mostly machaca, and it's pork machaca, and it's the Mexican American style machaca. So it's like shredded stewed beef, really moist. So when you have that, to me, that's closer to a Mexico style burrito de guisado, and it does have eggs, it does have beans and all that, but the principal ingredient's the machaca, and so that's a more flavorful burrito. The people that are doing the egg burritos, they're trying to do all these things. They're trying to smoke the potatoes, and they're trying to do all these things to add flavor because the eggs are going to be bland inside of the tortilla. So you want machaca. El carrito, Naomi.
So our last question, I'm kind of gonna mash two of them together. We have a question from JRAM339, which is how do you go about scouting unfamiliar restaurants? And we also have a question from G London, which is what are your rules of thumb for choosing a place to eat when you have no prior knowledge at all?
Part of this is tricky because at this point in my career, I do know a lot about a lot of cuisines, and I've had a lot of experience. Of course, Los Angeles gives you the opportunity to sample. Now, of course, not just like it is back home, but you get to sample a lot of different cuisines from around the world, more than you would in another part of the United States. Um, but my approach again is to know about eateries. I want to know eateries first. More, you know, you can look at a list, and if you look at a list of dishes, it doesn't tell you where to go to get those. It just says like, oh, you want to have, or it might tell you where to eat that thing, right? You're going to eat, go to Mexico City, go eat marisco set, mi compa chava, which another Naomi question this week. And so the first thing I'm going to say is, well, that's not from Mexico City. Um, so, but you're being told a specific place, right? So I digress. But the so I'm going to be looking at what kinds of eateries. So Mexico City has taquerias. And now how do you so you're saying, well, how do you have that knowledge, right? Go on the map, go on Google Map, and just start zooming in, and you're going to start to see familiar words. There's lots of taquerias. There's lots of places that sell tortas. There's lots of places that have the F word, fonda. Okay, there's cantinas, there's comedor, and so I'm like, oh, what's this? There's this comedor, there's a comedor that. So I start clicking on those, and then I look at the menu, and once I've seen about, I want to see 10 of those, 10 comedores, 10 fondas, 10 taquerias, and then I'm gonna say, oh, they have different taquerias in Mexico City. So then I see one is al pastor. So now I'm gonna like put in al pastor on the search, and now I'm going to come up with al pastor, and then taquerias. And the other one was suadero, or it was carnita. So now I'm going to put that in the search. I'm going to start building up like the types of eateries. I'm more concerned with eateries than I am having a list of restaurants that have been vetted by influencers and food writers that are the most popular places, right? So if you understand the way people eat, you understand where they eat, like in Spain, tavernas. So you're going to look for a taverna. And then in Italy, you're going to look for an enoteca, right? So these types of places, if you start seeing the patterns of how people eat and understanding that. Now, if you don't even get that chance, let's just say you and I, we were parachuted in. We didn't get to look at anything. This does happen to me sometimes. You're coming into town, you don't have much of a list going. You don't really know what they have there. So find that central market, find the center of town and look at and just walk around a little bit. Walk around the market, look at the market stalls. What's their menu like? And then, oh, these are the foods that are the most popular for that culture, you know? And so you're going to start seeing that. And it honestly, it'll take you about a half an hour just walking around. Half an hour walking around, and then you're like, okay, this is the type of eater I'm going to look for when I go out tonight. Argentina is another place where I'm in Buenos Aires, and I noticed that, wow, they have steakhouses and they have steak sandwich places, and they have regular restaurants that like bodegon, which is a type of pub, but like everybody has carne asada. They have parrilla, right? And so I go to every Argentine restaurant knowing that I'm going to have, like, the pattern is they have, everyone has empanadas, and everyone has steaks, and they have sandwiches, and they have pasta. And then this is a kind of restaurant that doesn't have pasta. And so again, you learn the way people eat, where they eat, what the ingredients they eat, and then you're going to be able to look. Now, as far as vetting, I think that you just have to generalize this idea of what good food looks like. So think about in your hometown, what are the best restaurants? And what does the food look like? Like, what's the presentation? What's the concept on the plate? Um, and so apply that to a restaurant. And I'll walk in and look at the tables. And don't be a creep about it, but look at look at people's tables and say, you know what? This food looks really good. People look really happy here. And yeah, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna give this a try. This fits my criteria. This is the type of eatery I'm looking for. The food looks good, looks quality. It looks like it has, don't just go on busy places, because there's all kinds of reasons places are busy, And so busy's one thing that, yeah, that'll get your attention. Oh, there's a line, but sometimes you're gonna get in a line for some weird ass jelly thing at Smorgasburg, right? So like you you might not be in line for something that special. But I think you have to generalize this idea of what good food looks like, because there's just no way you're going to know if you're in Cambodia, like, whoa, I won't know a good version of this plate, you know and but you can generalize that from your own culture of, quality food has a certain look. You guys know this. You guys go to all the great restaurants in town. There's a certain thing that looks on the plate. There's a certain look on the plate. There's a certain way it sets on the plate, how it fills the plate, the colors. All those things need to be there, and of course the flavor. And once you start eating in that culture, you're going to start understanding, oh, this is a bitter culture, this is a salty culture, this is a sweet culture, this is a sour culture, this is an umami culture. And you'll start getting flavor profiles, spicy, places that use lots of chiles. And I think that's the best way. And I still have to do it. I still have to build guides. I've had to do research before for places I've never been, and going for the first time, and I'm leading people around. And so I use this same method of finding the eateries, finding neighborhoods. When you find good food in a neighborhood on a map, that's usually the sign, like, oh, I bet you there's other good food, because in around the world, vendors, chefs, cooks are attracted to places where, oh, and in Lima, there's a good cevicheria in this neighborhood. So this is the place to go, because that's the good customers. The good customers go to that neighborhood for ceviche. And so you're going to open your cevicheria in that place, and you're going to try to compete with this place that's good. So you're coming in, guns blazing. You're coming in with a big, cool uh, nice concept, and you're really trying to be competitive. So you want to go to those competitive neighborhoods, places that have lots of taquerias, places that have lots of cevicherias, the places in Buenos Aires that have lots of sandwich shops, the choripan places. So that's it. And I think and also just trust yourself. Don't rely on, oh my God, the influencers, they're so dumb. I mean, they don't know. I know that's why you're talking to us, because they're giving you nothing. They're just a big word salad. And and so trust yourself, and use that method. You don't have to study the cuisine. I mean, I'm saying that it would be nice if you did, but you don't have to just rely on that. You can trust yourself, and just keep it simple. Look for the types of restaurants. Does the food look beautiful?
I think those are great tips. That's all we have time for today. So thank you everybody for submitting your questions.
Thanks to everyone except for Naomi.
And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the Taqueando podcast this week. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode. And please leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts.